If there is one thing that makes the whole movie and TV world look over at Britain with envy, it is Mr. Bean. A character who barely even needs to talk, and still somehow made it all the way around the world, pulled tens of millions of viewers in front of the screen, and got sold to hundreds of countries. That is not just a hit sitcom anymore. That is a full-blown TV phenomenon. People love Mr. Bean because he is weird, clumsy, and somehow has this gift for turning perfectly normal things into total disasters. The only thing is not many people realize that around this character there is a whole pile of behind-the-scenes facts, even stranger than whatever made it on screen. From a name that almost sounded like a joke, to an episode that got hidden from television for more than 10 years, to tiny little details fans watched for years and still easily missed. So, in this video, we are going through the 20 craziest and strangest facts about Mr. Bean. And trust me, the more you watch, the more you are going to realize he was even weirder than your memory of him. Number 20. Even the name. Mr. Bean was a weird accident. Can you believe that? No, of course you cannot. Who would ever guess that one of the most familiar names in world television, the name that instantly brings up that brown suit, that tiny little Minnie, and that blank face almost, was not Mr. Bean at all? Before they locked that name in, the character had drifted through choices like Mr. White and even Mr. Cauliflower. Just the thought of the whole world seriously calling him by a name that sounds like boiled vegetables is already weird enough. And the wildest part is that this happened really late when the character had already come a long way in development. Some sources even suggest that production had already started before the name was finally locked down. But that is how old television used to work. The biggest icons do not always come out of some perfect flash of genius. Sometimes they survive a few choices that almost turned out terribly. Rowan Atkinson also had a stutter, and he himself admitted it would come and go depending on the moment. So it is even more interesting that the most immortal name of his career started with the letter B, sounding heavy, strange, and very distinct in his mouth. And the name is not even the strangest thing on this list. Let me show you something that has been fooling your memory. Number 19. Your memory of Mr. Bean fooled a whole generation of viewers. If you grew up with Mr. Bean, there is a good chance that in your head, it always felt like a really long series, like it was always on TV, like it ran through a whole stretch of your childhood. But the truth is, Mr. Bean never ran like an American sitcom, one season, every year, nice and regular, like clockwork. The episodes came out little by little, spread so far apart that even now it still feels kind of funny. The first big points came in 1990. Then the episodes and specials kept getting scattered across 1991, 1992, 1993, 1994, and 1995. And I think that is exactly the magic of Mr. Bean. Some shows make hundreds of episodes and still slip right through people's memories, like water through your hands. But Bean did not. It showed up rarely, but every time it came back, it planted itself right in your head. So memory stretches it out on its own, makes it feel like it was always there. Number 18. This tank crushed the childhood of Mr. Bean fans. 2. What is the saddest episode in Mr. Bean? A lot of people would probably have to dig through their memory and wonder, wait, Mr. Bean had a sad episode? But yes, it did. In a series where almost every scene was built to make people laugh, the moment a lot of fans keep bringing up like a real emotional hit is when Mr. Bean's tiny little Minnie gets flattened by a tank in Back to School. Mr. Bean. Not a farewell scene, not some goodbye speech, just a little yellow car getting crushed right in front of the audience. And the reason is easy enough to understand. That Minnie was never just a prop. It was part of Mr. Bean, just like the red tie, the brown suit, or the way he always walked straight into trouble with that unbelievably blank expression. You see that car enough times long enough that it starts to feel like somebody you know. Then, all of a sudden, the show wipes it out in the cruelest way possible and stays ice cold about it, like it was no big deal. And trust me, if you think that shock was strange enough already, what comes next is even stranger. Because in this world, some things that look exaggerated on screen turn out to be completely real. Number 17. Mr. Bean's ear. Wiggling was not a special effect. There are some things in Mr. Bean that people automatically assume are just exaggerated performance, and the ear wiggling absolutely falls into that category. The first time you see it, it is funny. The second time it starts to feel familiar. But most viewers think the same thing. This has got to be just a goofy bit for the camera, or at most, some little acting trick. But no. That ear wiggling was not a special effect. Rowan Atkinson could actually do it in real life. Which means one of the fakest looking, most cartoonish, silliest details in Mr. Bean was completely real. And honestly, that explains a lot. Mr. Bean is funny not just because of the situations or the writing. He is funny because even his facial muscles seem unwilling to live in a normal way. That is something that has always made me like Rowan Atkinson a whole lot more than a lot of other comedy actors. He did not just act with words or timing. He practically turned his whole face into a living prop. And if you think only Mr. Bean's face was that weird, wait until you take another look at his apartment. That is going to be a little test for anybody who calls themselves a true fan. Number 16. Mr. Bean's home was not consistent at all. Let's play a little game. Think back to Mr. Bean's apartment. Where was his bed? If a separate bedroom just popped into your head, that sounds logical enough. But do not get too confident, because that is exactly the trap. In The Trouble with Mr. Bean, his bed is almost right there in the living room. But by the time you get to do it yourself, Mr. Bean, he suddenly has a whole separate bedroom, like he is living in a totally different apartment. In other words, if you think you remember Mr. Bean's home really clearly, your memory actually just got played by the show in a pretty clever way. Mr. Bean never worked by the rules of floor plans or home layouts. It worked by the rules of the joke. Whatever kind of space a scene needed to be funnier, the apartment became that exact space. Audiences do not remember Mr. Bean's home like architecture. We remember it like a feeling. Small, cramped, a little sad, and always ready to turn into a disaster. And if even the apartment could move around like that, wait until you see how this series was actually written. It gets even stranger. Number 15. Mr. Bean was not written like a normal sitcom. When people think about how a comedy series gets made, most of us picture a few writers sitting in a room typing dialogue, fixing dialogue, and then actors stepping in to deliver it in a funny way. That sounds perfectly reasonable. The only problem is, that is almost not how Mr. Bean was created at all. With this series, Rowan Atkinson and his collaborators usually started with a very simple situation, something like a scene in church, at the dentist, or some ordinary place where the second you drop Mr. Bean into it, everything starts slipping off course. Then from there they would test movements, test props, test the rhythm of the situation going up and down, see which parts got laughs, and push those farther and drop whatever did not work. In other words, Mr. Bean was not just written with words. It was shaped with hands and feet, with pauses, and with the way some completely ordinary object could suddenly become the source of a total disaster. That is why Mr. Bean always feels so different. It lives on movement reaction and comic timing that was tuned very carefully. And once you understand that, you start looking at the objects around Mr. Bean very differently too, especially that tiny little mini, because it has a history of its own that is a lot twistier than most people think. Number 14. Mr. Bean's Mini actually has a whole history of its own. Some things on screen are just props. Mr. Bean's Mini is not. It is practically part of his body. And the interesting thing is that Minnie did not have a simple history at all. Behind the scenes, that familiar little car did not live just one life. There was the first one, There were replacement cars, there were vehicles used for filming, and there was even one that got sacrificed for a single big joke. Sources differ a little on the exact model years, but they all agree on one thing. Mr. Bean's Mini was a lot more complicated than audiences ever realized. It even had a sworn enemy, that pale blue three-wheeled van that always seemed to run into trouble anytime it crossed paths with Bean. And maybe it is exactly because Mr. Bean made people remember a whole car the way they remember an old acquaintance that when this series exploded in the ratings in Britain, the numbers were that massive. Number 13. The Trouble with Mr. Bean Pulled. Nearly 19 million viewers in Britain. This is where I really have to admire Mr. Bean. The most watched episode in Britain was not some giant over-the-top special. It was The Trouble with Mr. Bean with nearly 19 million viewers. Once you hear that number, you realize just how formidable this character really was. Because Mr. Bean did not win big with huge things. He won with tiny little things. An ordinary day. A very ordinary task. A situation everybody thinks they could handle. Then Bean walks in, and within minutes, everything is completely off track. That is the rare gift this series had. It did not need to build some big world to get laughs. It just took the audience's own everyday life, bent it a little, twisted it a little, and let Bean do the rest. Number 12. Mr. Bean actually had a girlfriend. If you think Mr. Bean was completely alone, you are not alone in that. A lot of people assume the same thing. But the truth is, he really did have a girlfriend, and her name was Irma Gobb. This is not some side detail or something fans made up in their heads. Irma really did appear in the series, and she was one of the very few confirmed personal relationships Mr. Bean ever had on screen. Bean was not completely cut off from romantic life. The series just never developed that relationship the way a normal romantic sitcom would. It stayed awkward, offbeat, and very much in the spirit of Mr. Bean. Other than Irma, the series gives almost no background about Bean's personal life. Viewers barely know anything clear about his parents, siblings, or family. So Irma Gobb becomes a very important detail. She is proof that Mr. Bean was not some complete blank space. The series just always chose to keep his private life down to the bare minimum. And that is also why the character feels both familiar and still somehow hard to pin down. Number 11. Mr. Bean was heavily influenced by a French comedy legend, Surprised. Mr. Bean did not just fall out of the sky. Rowan Atkinson admitted that the character was heavily influenced by Jacques Tati, the French comedian and filmmaker, famous for a style of comedy that barely needed words and still made audiences understand exactly what was happening. And this is the key point. Mr. Bean did not live on razor-sharp dialogue. He lived on physicality rhythm, and that gift for turning very small things into a chain of trouble that kept getting bigger. That is also why the character traveled so far. A kind of comedy like that does not get trapped inside the English language or British culture. Viewers in all kinds of places can understand it with their eyes before they ever need words. And once you see that route clearly, you realize Mr. Bean is not just funny. He is the result of a very refined, very observant, and extremely durable comedy tradition. Number 10. A Mr. Bean episode was kept off TV for more than 10 years. You might think you know Mr. Bean inside and out, like you have every episode memorized. But the truth is, you may still have missed one. There is an episode that really does exist, fully part of the Mr. Bean world, but a whole lot of longtime TV viewers never actually saw it back when the series was still alive on the air. That episode is Hair by Mr. Bean of London. But the stranger part is how it was released. This episode was made in 1995, but instead of taking the usual route and airing on British television, it was released as its own VHS tape. Put simply, if you bought the tape, you could see it. But for most viewers sitting in front of the TV, it was like they got left behind. It was not until August 25, 2006, that the episode finally aired on television in Britain. That is why so many people think they finished all of Mr. Bean a long time ago, when really there was still a live-action piece sitting outside the shared memory of the audience for more than a decade. And the funny thing is, even something that sounds as familiar as Mr. Bean's weird little muttering voice has a history that goes back a lot farther than most people realize. Number 9. Mr. Bean Borrowed. One of Rowan Atkinson's own earlier voices. That muttering, grumbling voice of Mr. Bean, the one that sounds irritated and ridiculous at the same time, did not appear out of nowhere. Rowan Atkinson had already used that exact vocal color before in the sketch The Man Who Likes Toilets from Not the 9 O'Clock News in 1979. In other words, something a lot of viewers see as inseparable from Mr. Bean had actually been living on its own for years before the series ever showed up. That is a detail I really love, because it shows Mr. Bean was not some invention that popped out overnight. This character got put together little by little, from things Atkinson had already tried, already sharpened, and already kept in the back of his mind for years. Not just the walk, not just the face, but even the sound was distilled from an earlier stage of his career. And that is also why Mr. Bean always feels so complete, so distinct, even though he barely talks. And once a character is strange enough that even his voice comes with a past life like that, it is no surprise that people started building even stranger theories around him. Number 8. Why so many people think Mr. Bean is not from Earth. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever looked at Mr. Bean and thought this guy cannot possibly be a normal human being? Not just a little odd, not just a little goofy. I mean, completely not from this world. There is actually a reason fans think that. Mr. Bean appears in the opening like he is being dropped down from the sky in a beam of light. Sometimes he even seems like some creature who has to learn all the rules of society from scratch, from how to eat, go on vacation, and behave in a library, all the way to how to deal with other people. No matter how you look at it, he really does seem like he is trying to learn how to be human. But there is another way to read it, and honestly, I think it is even more interesting. Maybe Mr. Bean is not some alien at all. Maybe he is just a grown man, stuck in a childlike personality, lonely out of step, and completely unable to tune in to ordinary life. That is what makes this character so good. The series never forces you into one single answer. It just gives you enough little details to make you suspicious. So, what about you? Do you think Mr. Bean is an alien, or just the weirdest person who ever stepped onto a screen? Tell me your answer down below before we move on to the next fact, because that one is even stranger. Number 7. Even the people who created Mr. Bean never thought he would last this long. Looking back now, Mr. Bean feels like the kind of character destiny built to become an icon. But the truth is a lot more interesting than that. Even the people who created him at the beginning did not think Mr. Bean would last this long or go this far. Peter Bennett Jones, one of the people behind the show, admitted pretty plainly that nobody on the team had any idea just how successful and how durable Mr. Bean would turn out to be. And when you think about it, that makes sense. This was not the kind of character built like some safe hit-making machine. He barely talked. He was extremely strange. The comic rhythm was unusual, and there were not many live-action episodes to begin with. Nothing about the starting point looked like a guaranteed formula for success. And maybe that is the best part. Mr. Bean was not born as some giant franchise. Audiences were the ones who held on to him, carried him everywhere, and slowly turned him into a legend far beyond what anybody originally imagined. Number 6. Mr. Bean's diary reveals a mind that is honestly a little disturbing. How many people watching right now even knew this diary existed? If you did not go, look it up, because it shows that what is going on inside Mr. Bean's head is even stranger than you thought. The book came out in 1992, and what makes it interesting is not just that it expands the world of the character, but that it lets viewers look straight into the way Bean thinks. It has all kinds of stuff that feel exactly like him: ridiculous plans, pointless little musings, messy drawings, and invention ideas that already sound like a bad idea. But the funniest part is how the diary shows just how petty Bean can be. He irrationally hates a neighbor he has never even met, and it reveals all these very specific obsessions in a way that only Mr. Bean could. It is really fascinating. A lot of people think the series itself was already mischievous and strange enough, but this diary lets you see how that sneaky little mind actually works. And trust me, the closer you look, the more you realize his world is packed with details that are a lot stranger than the surface makes them seem. Number 5. The word "fut" in Mr. Bean did not appear just once. Did you ever notice this in The Return of Mr. Bean? There is a little word you can spot on a wall near the street musician playing saxophone. That word is "fute." It does not sound like anything important, just some random little bit of text in the background, right? But the interesting thing is, it does not disappear for good. Later on in Mr. Bean Goes to Town, Mr. Bean shows up at a place with that exact name, Club Fut. This detail is tiny, and nobody steps in to explain it. Nobody shines a light on it and forces you to notice it, but it makes the world of Mr. Bean feel more carefully planted than its goofy surface lets on. This is not some giant secret that changes the whole story. It is just a really subtle little wink between episodes. And once you start noticing things that small, you realize there are a lot more old little pieces around Mr. Bean than ordinary viewers would ever guess. Number 4. Mr. Bean landed on exactly the right broadcast date. A lot of people probably do not even remember the Mr. Bean pilot anymore. It was actually filmed toward the end of 1989, and at first the plan was to air it sometime in December. But the network changed its mind. They moved it to January 1st, 1990, and that turned out to be an incredibly smart decision. The reason is simple. New Year's is when a lot of people home life slows down, and audiences tend to spend more time in front of the TV. For a character as unusual as Mr. Bean, that was almost the perfect time slot to test his luck, and the result went way beyond expectations. The first episode was a major hit, and that made the New Year's scheduling model feel like a really dependable move for the series. Later on, some of Mr. Bean's other important air dates kept landing right on that same day, and the audience numbers stayed very high. In other words, Mr. Bean did not just arrive at the right moment. He got put on stage at exactly the time viewers were most ready to welcome him. Number 3. Mr. Bean was sold to more than 245 countries and territories. 245. That one giant number says everything. Mr. Bean was not just big in Britain, and he was not just some old TV phenomenon people remember now because of nostalgia. Based on more recent industry figures, the brand has been sold to more than 245 countries and territories. That is a scale very few comedy characters, especially one who barely relies on dialogue, could ever reach. What matters is that Mr. Bean went that far, not because he talked a lot, but almost because of the opposite. He got laughs through physicality, rhythm, and the way he handled very ordinary situations in a completely off-track way. That is why audiences in so many places could instantly understand what was funny about him, even if they did not share the same language or the same culture. Mr. Bean did not just cross borders, he pretty much crossed language barriers too. And once a character has traveled that far, it is not hard to understand why viewers at home embraced him as a huge phenomenon right from the start. Number 2. Mr. Bean was a big hit from the very first airing. A lot of people now look at Mr. Bean like some monument that got loved because it was rerun for so many years. But the truth is, he was already a huge hit during the original run. The very first episode, which aired on January 1st, 1990, pulled in about 13.45 million viewers in Britain. After that, The Trouble with Mr. Bean jumped to around 18.7 million viewers, and Merry Christmas, Mr. Bean got close to 19 million. For a comedy series with very few live-action episodes, those are extremely powerful numbers. Right from the beginning, audiences embraced him like a real phenomenon. And when a character can pull that kind of huge audience and also travel that far, it is not really surprising anymore that he ended up collecting a cluster of major international awards too. Let's move to the final fact, because this one might actually make you feel a little proud of him. Number 1. Mr. Bean was not just famous. He was recognized by the whole world. If you only look at Mr. Bean from the outside, it is easy to think he is just a funny character, a grown man acting like a child, a pop culture phenomenon so big that everybody remembers him. But the truth goes farther than that. Mr. Bean did not just win over audiences. He was also recognized by the international television world itself with a whole list of major awards, including the International Emmy, the Golden Rose of Montreux, and the American Cable Ace Award. Some sources even mention the Banff World Television Award as part of that run. Put simply, this is not just a character who got famous by luck or because he was rerun for years. This is a brand that both audiences and people in the industry genuinely recognized. And that is the part I have always admired most about Mr. Bean. He almost never relied on dialogue. He did not need smart speeches or razor-sharp punchlines. And still, he went all over the world, still pulled in tens of millions of viewers, and in the end left behind a stack of awards that not every comedy character could ever reach. The deeper I dig, the more I realize Mr. Bean is not simple at all beneath that goofy surface. Behind that blank face is a whole world that was built with a lot of care, a lot of precision, and sometimes even more warmth than people expect. To me, that is the real sign of something that truly lasts. You can laugh at it as a kid, then come back years later, and find yourself loving it in a completely different way. Now, it is your turn. Which fact surprised you the most? And is there any Mr. Bean detail you have always remembered that I still did not mention? And go ahead and tell me about the first time you watched Mr. Bean 2 on TV, on VHS, or one of those random rerun afternoons. I really want the comments on this video to turn into a real Mr. Bean fan reunion, where everybody brings one happy memory with them.